My name is Lena Whitmore. I was 12 years old the night I stopped believing that adults would save me. I didn't understand abuse when it started. In our house, it wasn't screaming or broken furniture. It was rules, timetables, consequences. My stepfather called it structure. The punishment room was the basement storage area. Concrete floor, no insulation, a single bulb dangling from the ceiling like it was embarrassed to be there. It smelled like wet cardboard and rust. He said the smell built character, said it reminded children that comfort was earned. That night, I broke one rule. Homework after 9 o'clock. I had a biology test the next morning. I thought being careful would matter. I kept the desk lamp dim, just a soft yellow glow, barely touching the pages. I was memorizing cell structures when I felt his hand clamp down on my shoulder. "What part of lights out at 9 don't you understand?" he asked quietly. That was always the worst part. He never raised his voice. "I have a test," I whispered, already knowing it didn't matter. 3 days, no food, he said, squeezing harder. "Maybe then you'll learn time management." He walked me to the basement like a routine chore, took my textbook and ripped the pages out one by one while I watched. Paper sounded louder when you weren't allowed to cry. "Clean that up tomorrow." Then he shoved me down the steps and locked the door. This wasn't new. What was new was the window. I'd been loosening its screws for weeks, ever since the night he threw my mother down those same stairs and she told the neighbors she'd tripped. That was the moment I learned help wasn't coming. Silence was survival, for her. Escape would have to be mine. I waited until 3 a.m., listening for the steady hiss of his breathing machine upstairs. My mother would be asleep by then, buried under anxiety medication prescribed by a doctor who never asked the right questions. The window gave way with a soft groan. Every creak felt like a gunshot. It was barely wide enough for my shoulders. I pushed through anyway, scraping skin, biting my lip to keep quiet. I carried one backpack. Inside, clothes, my birth certificate, and $340 I'd saved tutoring kids at the library. Mrs. Rodriguez paid me in cash and never asked about the bruises. I didn't go to a friend's house. That would have been too obvious. I went to school. There was a broken gate behind the gym. I crawled into the equipment shed where I'd hidden a sleeping bag days earlier, just in case. For 2 weeks, that shed was my address. I arrived before the janitors. Washed up in locker rooms, attended every class, kept my grades perfect, stayed invisible. That's the trick about being quiet and smart. People assume you're fine. Then came the Amber Alert. My face appeared on everyone's phones during English class. Missing child, possible abduction. That night, my stepfather stood on local news with his arm around my mother, his voice cracking on cue. "Please bring our daughter home," he said. "We just want her safe." The same man who dislocated my shoulder teaching me softball. The same man who left our dog outside until it froze. The next day, students studied their phones, then faces. I kept my hoodie up, ate lunch in the bathroom. I fell asleep behind the biography shelves during study period. That's when Mrs. Thompson found me. She didn't say anything at first, just looked at me. "Lena," she said softly, "come with me." In her office, she asked one question. "Are you safe at home?" I rolled up my sleeves. Then my shirt. "There's more," I said, "but you understand." She did. She didn't call my parents. She called social services. And for the first time in my life, adults believed me. They came faster than I expected. 2 social workers, a detective, a woman with a camera who spoke gently but never stopped documenting. They asked questions in calm voices, like they were afraid to scare me back into silence. I answered carefully, not because I wanted to protect anyone, but because years of surviving had trained me to measure every word. They photographed the bruises first, then the burns, then the older scars that had faded into pale reminders across my arms and back. The detective's jaw tightened when I explained the basement. When I described the bucket in the corner, the cold floor, the locked door. "This has been going on for how long?" he asked. "As long as I can remember," I said. For once, no one told me I must be mistaken. That afternoon, they took me to a temporary foster home. It was clean and quiet, but I barely noticed. My body was still buzzing, like I'd escaped a fire and didn't yet believe the heat was gone. The arrest happened the same day. I wasn't there when they put the handcuffs on my stepfather, but I heard about it from the detective later. He said the basement told its own story. Scrape marks on the concrete walls, dried blood they couldn't scrub away, the bucket, the lock. They found my mother's medical records too. A long list of injuries explained away as accidents. Falls, clumsiness, anxiety, everything added up. When they told me he'd been arrested, I felt nothing. No relief, no joy, just space. Mrs. Thompson visited me that evening. She brought a turkey and Swiss sandwich, apple slices, and a small carton of milk. I ate like my body had been waiting for permission. "You did the right thing," she said, squeezing my hand. I wanted to believe her. The prosecutor said the case was strong. Open and shut, he called it. 20 years minimum. He explained things carefully, like the world was finally slowing down to my pace. The custody hearing came quickly. Mrs. Thompson sat behind me. My foster parents were there too, offering smiles that were meant to be comforting. I focused on my hands instead. The courtroom smelled like old paper and floor cleaner. Everything felt too polished, too orderly for what my life had been. Then the judge walked in, and my blood turned to ice. I knew that face. It was framed on the wall of my stepfather's office at home, smiling, arms slung around another man's shoulder. "College roommates," he'd said once. "Best friends for 30 years. The judge looked directly at me and smiled. "After reviewing the evidence," he began, "I'm ordering immediate family reunification." The words didn't make sense at first. They echoed, hollow and unreal. Family reunification. Mrs. Thompson stood up so fast her chair screeched. She demanded the judge recuse himself, her voice sharp and shaking. The bailiff moved toward her instantly. The prosecutor flipped through his paperwork, panic blooming across his face as he pulled out a conflict of interest form. Blank. The judge leaned back, calm as ever, explained there was no legal requirement to recuse himself over casual acquaintances. Nothing improper, nothing to see. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my stepfather adjust his tie, just once. The corner of his mouth lifted. My foster mother squeezed my hand under the table. She whispered that they would appeal, that this wasn't over. But the child services officer was already approaching with a thick folder of transition paperwork. Prepared in advance. Everything had been decided before I ever sat down. Mrs. Thompson tried to block the aisle. Security moved in. The judge called for order while my stepfather stood slowly, playing the relieved parent perfectly. His eyes never left mine. I had seconds to choose. Scream and prove I was unstable, or comply and wait. Across the room, the prosecutor caught my eye. His lips moved. "I'm sorry." I nodded. As Mrs. Thompson was escorted away, I leaned toward my foster parents. "Check my library cubby," I whispered. They looked confused, but nodded. They didn't understand yet. They would. The house felt smaller when I returned, tighter, like the walls had leaned in while I was gone. The rules doubled, the supervision tripled. That afternoon at school, I needed permission to use the bathroom, but my foster parents were no longer my legal guardians. During lab, I took a risk, let my sleeve slip just enough. Ashley saw the bruises. Her eyes widened. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. We finished the lab in silence. That night, my stepfather announced a safety check. He went through my backpack slowly, every pocket, every folder. He picked up my calculator, turning it over in his hands. My heart pounded. The flash drive was already gone. Bathroom break. Inside my shoe. 3 moves ahead. The next morning, Mrs. Thompson wasn't at school. By lunch, the rumors spread. She'd been barred from campus after the courtroom incident, her position under review. Another adult removed for trying to help. But something else happened that day. The substitute librarian, a woman named Miss Davis, used a hand gesture while explaining the checkout system. Subtle, almost meaningless. Almost. Mrs. Thompson had taught me that signal during tutoring. a way to identify safe people. I tested it while returning a book. Miss Davis's eyes flickered. "Bibliographies matter," she said casually, emphasizing certain syllables. I understood. At home, my mother slept 16 hours a day. I found the prescription bottles. Did the math. Triple the normal dosage. Enough to keep her quiet, compliant, useless as a witness. Gather evidence or save her. I started removing pills carefully, adjusting the log so it looked normal. The change was slow, subtle, but my stepfather noticed. He always did. He scheduled an emergency appointment to adjust her treatment. Something was shifting. I could feel it. During computer class, I accessed an anonymous email account, typed 3 words to an address I'd memorized from a business card. Evidence available. Urgent. The reply came minutes later. Instructions. A dead drop location. A grocery store my mother frequented. The same place Mrs. Thompson shopped. That weekend, everything began to crack. But I didn't know that yet. I just stayed quiet, invisible, and ready. The house changed after that, not in obvious ways. There were no new locks, no raised voices. My stepfather didn't need theatrics. Control, for him, had always been about anticipation, knowing what someone might do before they even considered it themselves. He started working from home more often. His laptop stayed open on the dining table. The router was moved into his office. The bathroom door stayed cracked open when I showered. Casual. Just enough to remind me I was being watched. I adjusted. I counted steps, timed routines, memorized when his coffee refilled, when his calls ran long, when my mother's eyelids fluttered in that half-awake state where she could still hear but not respond. The pills were the hardest part. I removed them slowly, never more than 1 dose every 2 days. I made sure the remaining pills rattled convincingly in the bottle. I wrote numbers in the medication log that matched what a tired, distracted caregiver would record. At dinner, my mother started finishing her sentences. She asked questions again, small ones. Where I'd put the mail, whether it would rain. My stepfather noticed the first night. "You seem more alert," he told her, smiling the way he smiled in front of other people. She nodded uncertainly. "Good," he said. "I'll call Dr. Williams in the morning. Adjust the dosage." That night, I didn't sleep. At school, Miss Davis became careful. She never spoke to me directly, never lingered. But books appeared in certain places, volumes on legal advocacy, case studies, biographies of whistleblowers. She taught me how to check out materials without leaving a trail, which cameras blinked when active, which didn't. The network wasn't large, but it existed. Ashley avoided me after lab. That was expected. People who noticed bruises either leaned in or pulled away. Fear chose for them. The email account stayed silent for 3 days. On the 4th, a response appeared. Drop confirmed. Maintain normal behavior. The grocery store felt too bright, too loud. My stepfather insisted on coming with us, hovering beside the cart, correcting my mother when she reached for the wrong brand of cereal. In the feminine hygiene aisle, he turned away for exactly 10 seconds to answer a call. That was enough. I slid the envelope behind the bottom row of pads, pressed it back into place, walked away without looking. The evidence was no longer mine to carry. That night, he searched my room again. Thorough. Precise. He didn't find anything because there was nothing to find. 2 days later, the news broke during breakfast. Federal marshals had arrested a county judge during a private poker game. Judicial corruption. Multiple counts. Federal investigation ongoing. My stepfather froze mid-bite. He turned the volume up. The name scrolled across the screen. His friend. His safety net. My mother stared at the television, confusion sharpening into something like recognition. He made calls, left messages, paced. None were returned. That evening, he announced we'd be laying low. No school events, no extracurriculars, no unnecessary conversations. But it was already too late. The hearing was scheduled for the following week. Emergency. New judge, different district. He had 3 days. 3 days of escalating control. Final attempts. But the house felt different now, smaller to him. On the morning of the hearing, my mother wore a blouse she hadn't touched in years. Her hands shook, but her eyes were clear. She squeezed mine once before we entered the courtroom. "I remember now," she whispered. That was when I knew. Whatever happened next, he couldn't make us disappear again. The courtroom didn't look like it had the first time. That day, it had felt small, quiet, like a private misunderstanding disguised as law. This time, it felt crowded. Federal prosecutors sat beside the local team. Child advocates filled the gallery. 2 reporters occupied the back row, notebooks already open. The air buzzed with low conversation that cut off the moment the judge entered. He wasn't familiar. That alone steadied my breathing. He introduced himself briefly, appointed from another district, no local ties, a background in child advocacy. He didn't smile at anyone in particular. He didn't rush. My stepfather sat rigid beside his attorney, jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle twitch. His confidence hadn't vanished. It had curdled into something sharper, desperation dressed up as control. My mother testified first. The prosecutors had arranged a full medical evaluation weeks earlier. Her medication had been adjusted under supervision. The fog that had wrapped her for years was gone, and what remained was fragile but real. Her voice shook at first. Then it steadied. She spoke about isolation, about being told she was unstable, about being handed pill bottles instead of questions. She described the night she found me in the basement, blood on the wall, my hands raw and swollen from trying to claw my way out. Her voice cracked then. "I told myself it was my fault," she said, "that if I just stayed calm, stayed medicated, he wouldn't hurt her anymore." The courtroom was silent. Then they played Ashley's deposition. She appeared on screen, seated stiffly, hands folded in her lap. She didn't cry. She didn't dramatize. She spoke the way someone does when they've rehearsed the truth until it stops shaking. She described growing up around her father's power, the favors, the quiet warnings, the way corruption didn't announce itself. It settled in like dust. "I recognized the fear in Lena," she said. "It was the same fear I'd been taught to ignore." My stepfather's attorney objected twice. Both were overruled. When it was my turn, my legs felt distant, like they belonged to someone else. I stood anyway. The prosecutor's questions were gentle, methodical. I rolled up my sleeves, showed the scars, old and new, described the punishment room, the forced medication, the way control escalated when obedience failed. When I mentioned the soundproofing in the basement, my stepfather snapped. "That's enough," he shouted, rising from his seat. "She's lying. She's always been dramatic, ungrateful. You have no idea what I've sacrificed." The bailiffs moved quickly. His mask finally slipped. The calm authority fractured into rage, loud and unmistakable. Everyone saw him then. The judge didn't hesitate. The decision was swift. Immediate removal from custody. Criminal charges recommended. Temporary custody granted to my mother, contingent on continued treatment and supervision. A safety plan established. An extended support network approved. Federal charges were read as my stepfather was led away in handcuffs. Child endangerment. Witness tampering. Conspiracy to obstruct justice. The list felt unreal, like it belonged to someone else's life. In the hallway, Mrs. Thompson waited. She'd been reinstated that morning, her suspension reversed after the judge's arrest. The school board had appointed her as my educational advocate during the transition. She hugged me hard. 6 months later, I sat in the library where everything had begun. My grades had stabilized, my bruises had faded. My mother attended therapy 3 times a week and hadn't missed a session. The house felt different now, lighter. The windows opened easily. My stepfather's trial ended with a 15-year sentence. Other kids started approaching me during lunch, quiet ones, watchful ones. I taught them chemistry and math, but mostly I taught them how to document, how to notice, how to find their own Mrs. Thompsons. I kept a calculator with a hidden compartment, Not for evidence anymore, but for emergency numbers. Kids who wore long sleeves in summer understood. The system had failed me more than once. But people hadn't. My phone buzzed with a message from my mother. Dinner was ready. I packed my books and headed home to a place that was finally becoming safe. The scared 12-year-old who'd crawled through a basement window felt distant now. But I carried her with me. A reminder that survival was only the beginning. That real victory came from refusing to disappear, from staying, from helping others find their own way out.